So the request response lifecycle is actually a tricky one when you look at it in the big scope of what's going on here. We have an incoming request that hits our servlet front controller, just our dispatcher servlet inside of Spring. So that hands off the request. It delegates our request over to one of our controllers that we've set up. So the dispatcher is the router that comes in and says, what controller is going to handle it? I'm going to delegate this request over to this controller over here. That controller just routes traffic to where it's supposed to go. So it says, I'm going to handle that request and hand it over to the back end. Now, our back end could be composed of web services or a database or multiple databases or any number of things that we're gathering data from. And in turn, what that does is it hands back a model to us. And the model is basically just our data, what we're trying to represent on our screen. Once that gets back to the controller says, okay, I'm going to let somebody else do the rendering. Now, the rendering is separate from the business logic. So we have this model view controller design pattern. Everything is doing its own specified functionality here. So coming back from that controller, we have a model now or data that we're going to try and represent in the UI. So we go back to our front controller and it says, oh, well, who's going to handle this? Who's going to render this response? Well, let's pass our model down to some view template. For this course, we're going to use JSP, but we could be using FreeMarker or Velocity or any number of different technologies that integrate nicely with Spring MVC. Once it's gone down to our view template, our JSP page, we're going to return control back to our front controller and then return back our response to the browser. Now, this whole thing is kind of divided up into three different parts. We have our model, so where our model gets created, our view, so our representing view, and our controller. So that is where our model view controller is coming into play with our entire application.